And we are live. Okay, so Roberta, while we are waiting for people to come, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for joining me to do this, because I know that it really does help people listening in and we get really good feedback from it. And first of all, what is it you do? What's your career?
So I work in marketing and I work in the children's sector. So yeah, ultimately marketing's been I've studied it for 7 years, done my undergrad, then done my master's. So yeah, anything marketing related, I can kind of do that side of things.
Great. And then you said a bit earlier that you, getting into the children's sector, you began to sort of understand this really from seeing social workers and the children in the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it totally like opened up my mind to like how children's brains develop at a young age and how kind of it should be taught and how emotional children are and how we should sit with those emotions with them, you know, even though their behaviors might say one thing, they're actually feeling a totally different thing, and it's trying to explore that and understand that. And yeah, it kind of blew my mind really. And I'm not a social worker, but gosh, I feel like I am part social worker now because I've had to learn so much about it. So yeah, it's been really eye-opening for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Yeah, absolutely. And it is a revelation, isn't it? A revelation, isn't it? When you do start recognizing that, yes, kids might have a tantrum or something and they're angry, but it's actually because they can't explain, often, especially the little ones, they can't explain how they feel. And we tell them off for being angry or try and stop them from expressing their emotions. But hopefully not now with the understanding that we have. But
yeah, and things have changed so much, and obviously the research is there that shows, you know, sitting with a child when they are angry and comforting them and understanding why is so much better than sending them, you know, to their bedroom or putting them on the naughty step or anything like that, you know, because otherwise, you know, sending them away to say, oh, you can't feel that emotion isn't good. You know, we need to feel these emotions, and I suppose that's part of the journey as well that I've been through, to understand actually it's okay to sit with this and understand it and realize that you have gone through whatever. But yeah, it's a massive thing from a childhood perspective for sure.
Absolutely, and we're having to learn this as adults. Where wouldn't it be easier if we'd actually learned this as children? But generally, we start off by working. I know you haven't got children, I have got adult children, but we start off by doing what we were taught, what we learned growing up, until we realise that that's not that's not right. And I learned that before I did this work, because I remember having this very strong-minded 3-year-old daughter, which has actually stood her in great stead in her adult life or moving forwards. But at the time, it's like, oh my God, what do I do with this child? And I actually rang my father's cousin, who's a child psychologist in America, way before it was free calls or anything, and just saying, Fee, what do I do with this child? And she was so helpful and recognized it, you know, advising me on how I could help my daughter sort of express how she felt and why she was getting cross when I was expecting her to do such and such, and finding that middle balance. It was wonderful. Anyway, I just want to say welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to pop in the comments box and say hello, where you're from, that would be good. And then obviously you can put in some questions as we start chatting. Any questions you've got, just pop them in the comments box and we'll come to them. So let's start then, Roberta. Where would you like to start?
Should we start, I suppose, my symptoms really, and when they first started, maybe?
Yeah, go on then.
So it started in lockdown, so 2020, towards the end of lockdown. So obviously everyone had been told to kind of stay at home, and I'd gone from working in a really social environment to kind of being at home. And I was a very active person. I'd go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, then I'd play netball of an evening, so I was super active. So I'd gone from those outlets and those coping mechanisms to kind of being at home, plus added stress, and all of a sudden, I started getting neck ache, headaches, tension, a lot of tension up here, jaw aches, and I eventually started getting some migraines, which I didn't really realise at the time they were migraines. And it might sound really extreme, but on one occasion I called an ambulance because I thought my head was going to explode, and that was the only way I could describe it. The pain was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. And, you know, at the time there wasn't many people in the hospital, so I got seen to quite quickly and was given medication and whatever. But after that day, you know, it took me several days to recover from that, and I'd never experienced anything like it. It was something that my body has never ever been through. You know, everyone gets a headache now and again. You know, you take a paracetamol and it goes away, but there was no chance like anything like that was helping it.
What did they say was the reason for it at the time?
Well, I'd only been to A&E that once, and they basically just kind of shoot it off as a migraine, which, you know, at the time I kind of was like, oh, okay, it's a migraine. But then I was like, I've never had them before. I don't really understand why I'm getting them now. It was obviously I didn't know about the mind-body connection at the time, so I didn't put anything into that sense that, you know, linking them up really. But I went back to...
Sorry to stop you a moment, but I just think it's a really important point to make, that your pain was so extreme you felt your head was going to explode, and you went to A&E. And we know, and you know this now, that that wasn't a mind-body symptom. And so many people say, but the pain was so bad, you know, it had to have been real or physical or whatever. But pain is a perception, and absolutely that pain was real. But it was a mind body, it was a manifestation of unresolved stress. And was this at the end of the first lockdown or the end of all the lockdowns we had in the UK?
I can't remember which one it was, but it was in October that I got the symptoms, and I remember it was October that I went to the A&E. So I don't know if we'd just come out of a second one or we're just about to go into another one or around that time. But at the time, it makes total sense looking back. So I had so much going on. There was so much in my life that I was repressing so much emotion to kind of support other people at the time, and thinking, if I don't talk about what's going on with me, I'll be able to support these people better, and they don't need this stress in their life. What I'm going through, they don't need that. So I was really repressing all my emotions. Yeah, and that's a massive trait for someone with a chronic illness, which I didn't know either. People pleasing, that was like the worst thing I could have done, and my whole life I've been told, think of others before yourself. And I was actually talking to Phil, who's my therapist recently, that I don't know where that came from, but it's been set in my mind since I was very, very young that you've always got to think of others before yourself. And now I'm reading books and thinking, and they're saying, no, you've got to think of yourself before other people. In certain situations and contexts, I get that, but ultimately, my needs come first. If my needs aren't being met, then that's going to come out in a form. That's going to come out physically, and it did over that period. It came out physically, and my headaches, my migraines, and obviously at the time I didn't realise this, and it was just it's been a very long learning curve and experience, let's say.
Yes. And how did it impact your life?
I mean, like I said before, I'd go to the gym every day, I'd go to netball every day, and I went from being super active to, staying in my house most days and not being able to do much at all. I remember one time I tried to go to the shops, and on my way back, I genuinely thought I was going to collapse. I was so close to my door where I was nearly going to fall over. My body just could not take the fatigue that came along with it. It wasn't just the headaches and the migraines, but the fatigue that came along with it was just exhausting. And I was really fortunate to work in a very good workplace that was understandable and was very flexible around my symptoms. So I'd be fine some days, and then I'd have to go and lie down for an hour or two, and then I'd get a bit more energy, and then I'd work again. So I was working actually past my hours, but ultimately in that flexible working space. But I had no life really. Like I really didn't, and I'd end up not seeing people. I'd just stay in the house, and it really was deflating, and it was soul destroying really. Being in that
really impacts you even more then, because what we do, it encourages you to just be within yourself and focus on you and what you can't do and your pain, etc., rather than, as we know, it's so important to be able to get out there and connect with other people and just do things that you love to do as well.
Yeah, and that was it. I thought, I can't go to the gym, I can't go to netball now because that will make things worse. And ultimately, I know now that was the worst thing I could have done, because I put myself, in this little hole really, and there was I couldn't really escape. And I was like, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, and I even got to the point where I was like, I can't see friends because I'm worried about how it made me feel. Even the thought of going out with friends was daunting, because I was like, I'm going to sit there with all this pain and I'm going to be miserable. And I thought, what's the point in doing that? So I ended up not seeing friends, which made things...
Life just gets smaller, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And it's that fear factor as well. Like I was saying things to myself earlier, like the amount of times I Googled my symptoms was ridiculous. If anyone saw my browser history, must have thought, wow, this woman. But I just could not stop Googling, and I was like, well, what if it's this, and what if it's that, and what happens if this happens? And I really at one point thought I was, I had a tumor. I was really, really down that fear cycle. I was really worried about my health. It was really, really bad.
Which all the skills, isn't it? So what did you do treatment-wise initially?
So after the headaches didn't ease, I really thought it was just a phase. They got worse, my headaches got worse, my fatigue got worse. I did go to the doctor, and he referred me on to neurology. And at the time, it was kind of like face-to-face Zoom, the Zoom call. So I spoke to the neurologist, and at the time, it was only a 2-month waiting list, which was quite short at the time. So she said she was a bit shocked at the fact that it was out of the blue. She was very, people with migraines usually have them for long periods of time, and get them when they're young, and they're, they have them for their lives. And she was like, I'm a bit worried. So then that worried me. She did sound a bit worried. She's like, it's just unusual, she said. So then that got me worried even more. So we went for the MRI, and there was nothing on there that said, there was no tumor. There was nothing on there everything was fine. However, she did say there was suspected intracranial hypertension, which is like potential extra fluid on the brain. But they needed to see if I had optic nerve swelling. So I had to go to the opticians, and they confirmed that I didn't. But even that word suspected, I clung on to for dear life. I was like, I've got it. I've got this IHH. I've definitely got it. And I was Googling everything. All the symptoms were like matching up, and all the headaches and everything. I was like, no, this is definitely it. Even though it's suspected and they ruled it out, I was still clinging on to it because I had nothing else to kind of go with. So I think that was a massive part of the fear as well, not knowing what it was.
Yes.
Yeah, and thinking it was something worse.
And yet all the tests came back negative.
Yeah, all the tests came back negative. There was a couple of things that they said why it could have been suspected. So I had a narrowing of the veins and some empty cellar or something, but apparently people with migraines and headaches get those. And now I've also learned that actually when you do get extremely stressed, the body does make the veins smaller in certain areas, and that causes it, and that just kind of makes sense as well. So not realising it at the time, obviously, but it makes so much sense now. So yeah, I did get discharged from neurology, but I was not happy with my response. She basically said, you're fine, there's nothing there, just, gave me a list of tablets to take. And I was really, really disappointed. And I said straight away to the GP, refer me somewhere else. I need to go somewhere else. This isn't on. And this was this time last year, actually. And then he said, well, it's going to take a while now. There's a long waiting list. I said, no, I want to be referred on. So only now, this month, have I got that referral for a year later. And I did sit for a long time, and I thought, do I see this doctor? Do I see a neurologist? And I thought, well, no, what's the point? I'm 95% better. I don't get headaches, I don't get migraines. What can I say to him? Like, oh, I'm feeling loads better now, actually. But it just made me think, why was I second doubting that? But ultimately, it was bizarre, because I thought, wow, it's nice to know I don't need that person anymore, and I don't need that medical help.
Okay, so was it just medication that they put you on and just said you have to live with it, or what was their advice?
Basically, yeah, I tried so many different types of headaches and preventatives for headaches, and loads of different meds: amitriptyline, normotriptyline, tiripatan, Tiripamate as well, which was actually the horrific one. One of the side effects was depression, and I didn't actually quite realise this, but I was in a depression when I was taking the tablets, and I've never experienced depression before, so the side effects of that were almost just as awful.
Which was that one?
Is it Topiramate? I think it's called Topiramate.
Okay.
And yeah, one of the side effects was it, and it was only because I was in a Facebook group that I realised what it was. And I said to someone, "Has anyone else experienced this?" And the response was just ridiculous. Like, people were, their experiences were worse than mine, but they had it really bad with that depression. So I obviously came off that, but I had to come off that very quickly. Yeah, that was awful. And I've never experienced that before, and I can only explain it as being in a black hole and not being able to get out of that hole, and that was just awful. Yeah, that was really, really bad. So yeah, it was just all these tablets that they told me to take, and I obviously got new glasses because I was staring at screens, so it could have been that. And then I
Yes.
got, what else did I get? I got a new pillow. And I got one of the neck extenders because I went to a chiropractor and he told me that my neck is straight. So I need to get, I need to get my neck curved more.
Yeah.
So I bought all the instruments you could probably think of online. Just done all of that, all of what you could probably think of. I bought it, went to an acupuncturist, that made things worse. I did actually see the chiropractor for a while, but that didn't help anything. Yeah, I tried so much and I spent a lot of money trying to, figure out what it was, what's going to solve this, and nothing helped. I did go to a physio and they did do a bit of nerve, is it a TENS machine? So they put a TENS machine on my back for a bit and it helped for a little bit, but for a couple of hours, if that, and then the next day I'd be back to kind of feeling bad again. So there was nothing that helped.
So this was massively affecting your life by the sounds of it, and going on and on.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, and I was so desperate to kind of find an answer. I did go back to my GP after being on these tablets, and I thought, you know what, I can't be on these anymore. I don't want to rely on these tablets and all the side effects that come with it. So I actually said to him, like, what's our next step? And he was like, well, you could be on this forever. This is, you're going to have to take medication for the rest of your life. And then that's when I thought, I'm not doing that.
Of course.
I'm not doing that. I used to be fit. I used to be gym. I used to be so active. I used to, go walking and hiking, and I could barely walk to the shops.
And you're young. To leave it, living the rest of your life like that must have been horrendous. I just want to say hello again to everybody. Nice to see you all. And if you have any questions or just want to say hello, then pop something in the comments box. So presumably you Googled again. Is that when you came across our work?
Well, it was quite strange. I didn't come across it straight away. I actually came across positivity stuff, and I came across manifestation and stuff like that, and some podcasts across manifestation. So I was actually manifesting. I was going, I'm going to heal myself, and I was affirmations. And gosh, I was walking outside in the garden with no shoes on at 6 a.m. Trying to ground myself and doing all that kind of spiritual side of it before actually coming across the work that the mind body work is. But that kind of led me to it.
I was going to say that would open you up to our work anyway, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my positivity was great. I really, thrived. I was so positive, but by the end of that, a couple of months, but ultimately the pain was still there. And that's when I was like, there's got to be a route. Do you know what I mean? There's got to be some answers out there. And then
it sounds like you were at least coping better, even though you still had a pain, which you still obviously wanted to resolve.
Yes, yeah, oh, definitely, yeah. And at that point in my life, like, there was a lot of things that I kind of let go of. A lot of things I started saying no to because I realised that I needed to kind of look after myself, and my health was priority. So that was a massive thing. And as I mentioned before, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. So it's still a learning curve for me to say no to certain things. But I'm reading another book at the minute called Not Nice, and it doesn't refer solely to the mind and body, but it mentions a lot about chronic illnesses. So it definitely relates, definitely kind of another. So
it all does, working with personality, setting boundaries, learning to say no, all of this is helping us reduce the stress and self-induced stress that we're facing.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So I forgot what I was up to on my journey. So manifestation and kind of the positive side of things. And then I came across, is it Alan Gordon's podcast that they're linked to, like, the curable community. And he talks a lot about the science and the brain science behind it. And there was something in that just made me click. And I was like, wow, like when the symptoms started to me repressing my emotions and me, not thinking about myself at all, it all just clicks and it all just made sense. It just worked together really well, and I just thought, wow, this is it. Like, this is what I need to listen to. Yeah, so that was kind of it really. And I think the second bit really that kind of clicked with me as well was, as I said before, like, I stopped going to the gym, I stopped playing netball, and then he mentions in his podcast to do the opposite. Go out and do what you want to do. And I thought, what? But what if my headache? I was like, what? But my headache's getting worse, and I was like, oh no, like, really? But then I got to trust the process, and I kind of had to. And I started the gym back in October for the first time, And don't get me wrong, like the first few sessions were a little bit, you know, tender afterwards, but I kind of put that down to it would be anyway if you went to the gym after a long period of time. So I kept going, and I'm still up there now, and I'm doing amazingly, and I'm loving it again. So it really just goes to show that actually that's not going to make my symptoms worse. It's not going to, it's actually, I feel it was part of my coping mechanism in terms of like some stress and an outlet that maybe I needed the whole time, really. So
absolutely, but you don't recognize that at the time. You know, that's the difficult thing at the moment. I just seen we've got a message from Terry, who suffers from migraines and just find Alan's book, which is great. And thank you for having this conversation. Absolutely. And this is why we do it, to help people. And certainly Alan's work is a great start, and the educational side of it is so important. With all the work that we do is really important. And being able to address the fears, that's one of the first things that we would encourage people to do, to consider what your fears are, what your beliefs are, and then start to sort of work on those, whether it's through the pain reprocessing therapy, somatic tracking, emotional awareness, journaling. There's lots of different ways that we can use that, but PRT is a great way to start. So well done, well done. So let's, so what Tony says, I have the same symptoms and have had the same exact experience with doctors and medications. Also have occipital nerve pain. Still trying to figure out how to recover using mind body techniques, and what techniques in particular helped you. Well, that's, I think, is what we're going to go on to now. So thank you, Tony. Okay, so you worked by yourself with Curable, and having read Alan's book as well. How you, obviously you say you got back to the gym and started doing more. Did the pain start settling down straight away? Did it take time, or was that why you saw Phil?
So I probably, listening to the podcast and reading the books and stuff, that really massively helped. And I probably went from like up to 30-40% better very quickly, probably within a few months actually. It's not as quick as some people, but don't like measure your journey against anyone else's, because I'm still on my journey. Like I've still got probably another 5, maybe even 10% to go, but I know I will get there. And it's been probably a year now since I've really started looking into everything with the mind body. So
and I think it's interesting when people say, well, I'm 95% there, or I'm 98% there, because, you know, I was triggered, you know, there was a trigger and I had a headache, or the start of the headache. That means I'm not 100%. And actually, that's the human experience. You know, it's the mind and body working together. The difference is, rather than going down the fear of, oh God, I've got this is starting, I'm going to get a migraine, I'm not going to be able to work, I can't do this, whatever, is about, oh, that's interesting. And being curious, and what is it that's going on at the moment that's triggered this? Because by working like that, and being aware and curious and addressing that, then the chances are you can avoid going down the migraine route. And that's, so that you ask any practitioner, that we will all say we have symptoms. It's just we use those as a barometer for how we're doing emotionally, and then we can work on that rather than going down the fear route, which means that the symptoms then persist.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, 100% better, but symptoms do arise on certain occasions. So, and it's just how I manage.
Did you have any, out of interest, any particular things like chocolate or wine or whatever that were triggers for you?
No, nothing like that. Not any food, and even light. Like I had a really bad migraine. Light, I could look at my phone, I could turn the light on. So it was really an unusual type of migraine. So.
Because quite often people do find that it's something they eat, or red wine or chocolate or whatever. And actually what has often been the case is that, excuse me, that they developed a migraine while really stressed, and they happen to have had some chocolate or red wine. And it's the unconscious mind that makes the connections of, oh, right, obviously that's dangerous, having chocolate. And there's that connection made. And then if you have that awareness and as well, then that sort of reinforces it, and you're about to have chocolate, and then you know that last time it caused a migraine. It could be conscious, it could be unconscious, but it reinforces those neural circuits involved. And we understand now the expectation of the effect, the predictive coding. You know, our primal brain's trying to protect us from something it perceives to be a threat. And it just happens to have been there, you know, when we were having a migraine. and when they put 2 and 2 together, our primal brain 2 and 2 together and makes 5. So yes, it can trigger it, but it's our beliefs that are so important as well. And trigger and cause are 2 different things. Because, you know, if there's a cause, then everybody who has, if red wine was the cause of migraines, then everybody who has red wine will have a migraine. Whereas actually, if it could be a trigger, which is different, and that depends on a whole number of things, depending on each individual and their experiences and their beliefs, behaviors, etc. So I just wanted to point that out, even though it wasn't relevant for you, because it might be relevant for others that might listen to this as well.
That makes lots of sense, and I suppose it kind of relevant for me in a way, because I was so active that when my headaches did come on, I kind of related it back to exercise and thought, oh, it's the exercise as well. So in a way it did.
Yeah. Hence stopping exercise. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so what were you doing for yourself, and what did you find helpful in those early days? I know that PRT, like in our work, we focus on the fears and address the fears first of all, and get people coming out of the head and into the body. That's really important with the mind-body conditions. So, but what did you find most helpful in those stages before you then went to see Phil?
So understanding the brain science was super important to me. My brain needed to understand what was going on. That was just like, it just needed to link it all up, and then it understood really the how the nervous system reacts, and the nervous system, talking all about that and fight or flight was really interesting.
And that helps relieve the fear as well, doesn't it? When you understand it, and that's when often people can have those ka-ching, those sort of aha moments where there's a letting go inside them. And that's often why people's pain will suddenly sort of calm down, because their primal brain is going, oh, okay, I don't need to be scared of that anymore, and calms down the fight or flight.
Yeah, so it's getting out of that fear cycle as well that was really important. So saying, you know, I can go for a walk, and I didn't go for a marathon straight away. You know, I did build it up slowly, and I did go to the gym and slowly and steady. But ultimately, like, I needed to get straight back into it, really.
And the more gently you do it, the less likely you're going to trigger a reaction.
Yeah.
Because often what can happen is if you thought, right, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm fine, I can go to the gym. And then maybe you're a bit achy the next day because you've been doing exercises you haven't done for a long time. Yeah. If that's mimicking, you know, that can mimic the pain maybe you had in your neck, let's say, then that could then be the trigger of migraines, because you then focus on that and the fear, and that can then ramp up. So actually just going gently and gradually and being self-compassionate, self-soothing, kind to yourself is generally an easier and better way forward than just pushing it through, unless that you've had an epiphany and you go, oh, right, that's fine, I'm going into it. But you do have to be careful of the after effects of suddenly doing exercise like that, because it could be an unconscious trigger.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely slow and steady. But another thing was somatic tracking. So telling myself when I did have a headache or feel something come on, telling myself I'm totally safe, and taking a few deep breaths and recognizing that I'm safe, and just telling myself that I'm safe. I just kept repeating that. And the first couple of times, nothing really happened, but I just kept going. And then eventually it almost became like a magic trick. I'd feel like I was like, I just turn a switch and my headache would almost disappear, like there and then, which was really crazy to say that happened so quickly. And yeah, I don't need to do it as much anymore, but I did think tracking was really, really helpful.
And it's good for you to say and recognize that it wasn't a magic switch to begin with, because so many people try out emotional awareness, somatic tracking, breathing, breath work, or any of the strategies. If it doesn't work in 1 or 2 sessions, they just think, well, that's not worked for me, or journaling, or whatever it happens to be, which is a shame, because you don't go on a diet for a day and expect to have lost a stone, or you don't go to the gym and expect to be significantly stronger when you've only been once or twice. It takes time, and we're retraining the neural pathways in the brain. So it takes time to retrain it and get the new neural circuits stronger, so that the pain pathways can just become dormant.
Yeah. Consistency is key. And like, I didn't go to, I don't know if people are on the Curable app, or I did use that first and learn about somatic tracking and things like that as well. So I didn't use it. I might have done it once a day for quite a while, and then I've started to steady, you know, twice a week or however often I needed. But meditation was really good. But it's not the normal meditation. So I've done meditation before, and this is very slightly different. It's very, significant to what's happening, self-compassion, people pleasing meditations and things that are associated with chronic illnesses. So it wasn't any meditation I'd ever done before, and it was really, really specific to kind of what you're going through, really, which is really important.
Yeah. Absolutely, because people who often will come into this work and say, well, I've meditated for years, and sometimes that's like a get out clause. Okay, I'm feeling really stressed, I'll go and meditate. And they might be meditating and at least having some quiet time, but maybe not addressing the emotions, not really understanding what is triggering things. It's just, okay, I'll meditate. So it needs to be quite specific to addressing what you wanted to address, and also being able to start really acknowledging how you're feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And so, those two were really the big ones to me. I mean, the writing exercises, I'm not going to lie, I did struggle with them. However, I've over the Christmas period, especially when I was with my family, love them, but I started journaling a lot, and it definitely helped in certain situations where, I'd usually wake up and get a bit annoyed still, but actually getting all that out on paper was so, so important and really, really helped me. So I definitely need to do that more and remember to do it more.
But maybe even the night before you go to bed on an issue.
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah, I did do that.
So you found specific meditations, a little bit of journaling, somatic tracking, self-soothing sort of thing helpful, and looking at your personality and how that was creating stress?
Yeah, so if people know, like, people pleasing is like a big one, isn't it? And there's perfectionism, which I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I'm a bit like OCD in certain things, and I need to be extra early for meetings, and otherwise that kind of stresses me out a bit. So there's perfectionism in certain areas of my life as well. So those two kind of reached out at me, and being a people pleaser, I've done it, I suppose, all my life, but it comes, I suppose, from childhood, doesn't it? Most experiences come from childhood, as you want to be, you want to be liked by people, and you say yes because you don't want to hurt anyone and you don't want to cause conflict. So that was a big one for me as well, just being a people pleaser and saying yes to a lot of things and not recognizing actually that's not what I need, that's not what I want, but ultimately just saying yes just to keep other people happy and just to make sure that there's no conflict, really. That was a huge one.
Yeah. So out of interest, when you came across this work, were you one of these people who said to yourself, well, I haven't had any real trauma in my life, and it took a while for you to recognize that we all experience some form of small t, even if we haven't had experienced any major trauma? Were you one of those?
Yeah, I was. I did have quite a lot of bullying when I was in secondary school, to be fair. So there was quite a lot of bad experiences there, but ultimately during my childhood, I could never pinpoint anything. Well, until now, there's a few things, but ultimately, that's really it.
Because if you think about it, it's your childhood and it's normal to you. And what we don't realize is the amount of pressure that's put on us by needing to conform to family expectations or cultural expectations or school expectations, even those alone, let alone bullying and things like that. But often it's as people start to really understand more and also start to notice their personality and behaviors, to start wondering, for example, okay, why am I a perfectionist? If you've never questioned that before, how can you even consider and then explore it and then notice because then it's about developing your felt sense, your interoception, so you become aware. You might be a perfectionist, like you say, and I certainly am in certain areas, but I am so much better than I was. And because I'm now aware, if I'm reaching a point where it's beginning to cause me stress because I'm trying to get something right, to actually know, oh, okay, look what's going on, and immediately calmer breathing down, do some self-soothing, maybe take a break, come back and then look at it. Whereas in the past, I just kept going until I got it right. And that's creating a lot of stress, isn't it? So by being able to identify that and understand why we are as we are, can be really helpful. And as you say, most of this is growing up and conforming and dealing with relationships in our lives.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you before, like, I've been taught to think of others before myself throughout my whole life, which is fine in certain contexts, but ultimately not when it comes before your needs. And like your needs and wants are really, really important in life. And actually, I'm reading a book, I've mentioned it before, Not Nice, and it actually says do the opposite. You know, don't think of others apart from children. You know, you've got children, that's slightly different, but you know, you know, they've got to be fed, so you've got to feed them. But ultimately, like that's, you know, you need to think of yourself, and ultimately your feelings and your needs and wants come before anyone else's, and that's the bottom line. Whereas I've always been taught the opposite. So I'm really learning loads of different things. So it's been a great journey.
It's a really wonderful personal development journey, isn't it? That we're all on, and we all continue to go on. And I think this is why it's so lovely. It's, you know, we're all continuing to learn.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to seek some help for you?
So I suppose I got kind of stuck with the Curable app a little bit, and then I didn't realise there was this SIRPA website until I'd got into the Curable app, and then I looked, and I just thought, you know what, I just need a little bit more help along the way, because I felt like I wasn't quite getting deep enough, if that makes sense. I wasn't quite reaching the level that I felt like I needed to reach. So yeah, looked onto the website and obviously contacted one of the therapists on there, Phil, who's just been absolutely fantastic. And I've learned so much, like so much more than, you know, the app kind of gives you. It gives you that little bit more understanding when you're talking to someone, and they can really explain it and really talk you through the techniques and the tools to really understand, you know, sitting with your emotions.
To individualize it with you, and to sort of handhold you through that, and to be able to guide. I think that's what many people don't recognize, that how helpful it can be. And also to help you, I would imagine he was really helpful in enabling you to recognize, identify some of the unconscious programs that were running with you, that quite often we're unaware of, and but if somebody's working with you, they can reflect that back to you. And then once you're aware of it, fab, because it's easier to deal with it then with that support and guidance.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I said to Phil before, like, I've been to counselling before, but this is nothing like anything. Do you know what I mean? It's not like anything I've been to before. It really is in depth in terms of understanding the mind-body connection and understanding how those emotions come out physically, but really getting to the root of those and sitting with that emotion and understanding that emotion is really important. It's something that I've definitely learned from Phil.
So not just about talk therapy, and it's, you know, and I know the way Phil works as well, it's very much about not being in your head, but actually being able to come out of your head, which causes us so many problems, and learning to, like you say, sit with your emotions, noticing what's going on, looking at you at different parts of you and how they're what's actually going on, and working with the different parts of you as well.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's nothing like talk therapy where you just sit for an hour and talk, you know, straight at someone. It is really very interactive, and there's a lot of methods that are used, and we'd sit there and we'd close our eyes and talk and think about different things that are coming up for us. And yeah, it was really totally different to anything that I've done before. It's really interesting.
So I would imagine you're a lot more aware now, or emotionally aware. So have a much more intuitive felt sense. So you're more aware of when something's been triggered, when you're feeling, you're frustrated or pressured or whatever.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing I probably should have listened to very early on, but always listen to your gut. And I never really got that fact. I never really got that saying, because that's the mind-body connection, isn't it? To your gut, it's a lot of it. So yeah, I'm more, I don't know what the word is. I'm more aware of when my sensations come up, and I need to acknowledge them and realize when those sensations do come up. But that's almost like most people, I think, should understand that, you know. But I suppose if they've not been through it, then I feel more sensitive now. I feel like I've been through that. I'm definitely more sensitive to those emotions now. Yeah,
absolutely. And so again, we've got quite a few people listening at the moment. So if you've got any questions, do pop any questions in, so that make the most of Roberta while she's here. So how has your life changed now, Roberta?
So I suppose along with manifestation last year, my main goal was to kind of heal. That was like what I had written on my book, and I want to heal myself and I want to get back to the gym. Those are like the two main things. And last year I achieved both of them, really, you know, in terms of, like you said, how much healing you're going to do in terms of that extra 5%, really, because everyone's going to have some sort of symptoms. But yeah, I achieved both of them. I'm back at the gym, I'm back at netball, which I generally thought I'd never do ever again. There was times when I really thought I'd never get back to the gym. I'll never be normal again. I'll never be able to live a normal life. And people around me that were talking to me, it was all I used to talk about as well. I just was boring myself by the end of it. You know, I talk to people and I'd talk about my migraines and my headaches, and but I couldn't stop talking because it was so integrated into me. I was bored with myself, it really was. So I think at that point as well, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to stop talking about this soon because it's too much.
I'm bored with myself.
Yeah, it really started to even bore me talking about everything. And I'm kind of glad I did, because that's the first thing, isn't it? Stop holding on to it and stop focusing on it, and stop giving it the time of day, because the more you give it the time of day, the more it's going to stay there and the more it's going to be with you.
Absolutely. And stop calling it my migraines or my headache or my back pain. Yeah. Because you're owning it then. And whether, and also calling it something different, a silly name or something can also help. But yes, avoiding talking about it and focusing on it. And that's why we encourage people to find something they love to do. Connect with other people, do fun things, have something so that when you wake up in the morning, you're thinking about something else, not just about, oh, I've still got this, or am I going to have pain today, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah. It's harder said than done, but if you use all the tools and techniques, it takes time, but it does work. And I'm kind of like living proof of that. So, and I try and explain that now to like my friends and my family, and it's really hard to explain that, because I think a lot of people think it's not really there. I think people think you can make the pain up almost, but the pain is very much there. And even though I know people going through similar pain journeys, I can't push it onto them. Like, I'll tell them about it and I'll explain about it and I'll say, you need to do this and do that. But if they're not ready to kind of go down that route and help heal themselves, then you can't really do much about that either. But I definitely recommend, if anyone is in any sort of pain and chronic pain and has been to the medical side of things and they're saying everything's fine, then definitely you need to explore this route and just take your time, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you do now for your own self-care? Apart from exercising and going out and seeing your friends now and playing netball, what else do you do? Do you do anything on a regular basis for maintenance and for just general self-care?
It sounds really strange, but I never used to take baths, and now I take long hot baths. It sounds really bizarre, and I know that might not be self-care, but I could never sit still for long enough to have a bath. I could never have the patience. And now I really tell myself it's important to relax and chill. And I do that now, which sounds like the strangest things, because that must be on people's like top self-care to-do list, but it never was mine. I still do the meditation as well. So whenever I'm feeling like, a bit agitated, or I'm feeling a lot of things in my body, I'll do the meditation, and I'll try and continue to do those. I did get into a habit of doing them first thing in the morning, then that's slowly kind of dwindled out, which is a shame. But I do feel like exercise is my main coping mechanism in terms of that emotion and feeling that gym, or I've started boxing as well. So, getting the anger out and stuff at boxing has been really, really good. So just a couple of things that I do,
And I think apart from that, it's the understanding, isn't it? And your awareness now of how you're feeling, because that means you can jump in more quickly. In the past, then if we're not aware of this, then we might react when we have a pain and then sort of back off. Whereas now it's about more aware we become, more sensitive, as you said you were. The more aware we are of how we're feeling, the more we can actually go, oh, okay, as long as we treat that as a signal, as a message that there's something we need to address, then that's the occasion when we go, oh, okay, what's going on that I'm not dealing with?
Yeah, and also if you do get pain coming up, it's also trying to recognise the emotion. But sometimes I don't recognise anything, and I think, well, what's happened today? what's happening tomorrow, what's happening in the next few days, because that can also be triggering things. You know, if you're subconsciously thinking about what's going to be happening or what happened yesterday. So yeah, thinking about what's in the close vicinity in terms of events and things like that.
I mean, even if you're not aware of what's going on, just taking that time out to sit with how you're feeling and to allow the emotions to be there and to be processed, rather than just keeping busy and ignoring it. So sometimes when we're overthinking to try and work out what it is, that can mean that we don't actually feel. Whereas actually, if we're just curious and we maybe even ask the question of our body, so what's going on? Wonder why I've got this here, without searching for it here, that can allow an emotion to surface. Or even free writing, ask the question on a piece of paper. So what's going on today? Why am I feeling anxious or whatever? And let the writing flow. Well, I've been doing this and I'm doing that, and often something comes up, and then as you're writing about it, and you allow the emotion to come up, you're processing it, which is great, rather than just ignoring it.
Yeah.
So Taylor wants to know what meditation.
So I use the ones on the Curable app. They have quite specific meditations that they use. So it wasn't just any old meditation, but I use Inset Timer now as well, because there's, I think I've gone through all the meditations on the app, but Inset Timer, you can actually be specific. So I find the self-compassion ones are really good. I don't give myself enough self-compassion. And actually that brings up a lot of emotion, and I didn't expect to cry on some of these meditations, but I did. And I was like, wow, like that clearly shows I need to do this more often, because that emotion, that releasing that was just really important. But self-compassion I found, and people-pleasing one that they've got, but there's loads that you can specifically look for on the Inset Timer one. So definitely worth having a look. But even just relaxing and resetting your nervous system, I find just helps massively. And doing that on a regular basis, you're going to be resetting it more and more and calming it down more and more, which is going to help in the long run.
Just nice, calm breathing. You know, there's so much information about breathing. Excuse me, just calming and breathing down, not necessarily really deep, but just nice, calm, regular breathing in and out. That's been really shown to be helpful. And even to imagine yourself in a really lovely place, you know, a place that you felt safe as a child, or even somewhere imaginary, and just to imagine yourself there and allow yourself to feel those feelings, and then maybe even have a hand on the heart, hand on the stomach, to calm breathing and imagining that, and then really focusing on the sensations in your body that brings, because that again can really just reset your body and bring you back into a nice, calm, safe feeling. Okay, well, I think we will call it a day now, but thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
Oh, I don't know if this is frozen or I've frozen. Are we still live? Oh no.